hard to imagine he's 28.
It's hard to imagine. You know what else is hard to imagine? You and I have been doing this together for 15 years.
That is amazing.
Wow. Okay. It
There
looks like
we
we have,
go. We got it up.
we
Good
did
for
it.
you.
Yay. All right, I'm going to come around the
And
front.
you have the PowerPoint?
Yep, it should be showing on
I,
your
I, I see it.
screen.
I see it.
Perfect.
All right, here we go. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfectly.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sarah Gottwallace, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Dr. Talbot Spivak Holocaust Memorial Committee. I want to thank you for coming out and showing your interest and your support in continuing Holocaust education. This is our 30th anniversary. We've been doing this committee for 30 years on this campus, so yay for us. And what better way to help us celebrate than to have an actual Holocaust survivor be able to come on and graciously tell his story, right? So Steen's able to see you on the mic, on the camera behind you, above that door, that big black thing on the wall there. So by show of hands, how many of you have heard a Holocaust speaker survive before, or Holocaust survivor speak before? Excuse me. All right, can you see all those hands, Steen?
No, I'm sorry, I can't.
We've got a handful of hands here. About half the room has heard a Holocaust survivor speak before. You guys are in for a very special treat. You need to hear as many Holocaust survivors tell their story as possible for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're not going to be able to have this experience for, another 20 years. Holocaust survivors who are able to tell their story are dwindling. So it's important that we hear their story because when they are no longer to share their truth, it's going to be up to us. It's going to be up to you to be the beacons of truth and light, carrying forward with the Holocaust. The other reason why it's so important to hear as many Holocaust survivors speak as possible is because there is still a growing mentality of anti-Semitism and of Holocaust denial. And it's important that you hear as many of these brave people share their stories so that you can, be the voice of truth going forward. You are the future. You are the future generation. No pressure, but this is on you. You've got to help us continue to tell the truth. And Steen's going to be sharing his story with you today. And at the end, that's all he's going to ask of you is to continue to tell his story. And I think given everything that he's gone through, everything that he'll be sharing with you, that's a very easy, fair request, right? So without further ado, I give to you our rock star of the hour, Mr. Steen Metz. Take it over, Steen.
Thank you very much, Sarah. First of all, thank you to Sarah and the committee for continuing this tradition. It's amazing that it's 30 years ago since it started. I feel very fortunate and very honored that I believe I've been part of the group, this session, for at least 10 years, if not longer. It was very interesting that many of you have heard speakers, Holocaust survivors before. You'll find that we all have a different story, depending on how old we were when we were in camp, depending on some differences in the camps, and also our culture. But I want to start off by telling you that about 5 years ago, I spoke to an 8th grade school class. I had a presentation very similar to the one today, followed by questions and answers like we'll do today. And I never forget when the 8th grade student came up to me and asked, "Do you feel guilty or lucky being alive?" First of all, coming from an 8th grade student, I thought it was a very, very good question. Maybe I should feel guilty, but I certainly feel very, very lucky. Can you imagine? I was in a camp with 15,000 children, less than 1,200, less than 10% survived, and I'm one of them. In many ways, I feel that I'm here to honor and remember the 6 million Jews and millions of others that disappeared. They were murdered due to Hitler's atrocities. They cannot be here today, So I'm fortunate to be the messenger. As Sarah mentioned, we're getting up in age, and a few years, unfortunately, we will not be able to continue the tradition. And whenever I talk to a group like today, I always ask them, each one, be my ambassador, talk to at least 4 people, tell them you know that the Holocaust took place because you had an opportunity to listen to an eyewitness. This is so important. I feel it's more important than ever before that we always remember the Holocaust. It happened many, many years ago. Unfortunately, more and more people are forgetting that it happened. Even worse, increase in anti-Semitism, increase in vandalism of Jewish property, and last but not least, Holocaust denial. I realize that I'm not totally objective, but I can never understand how anybody can deny that the Holocaust took place. So, if I may have the first slide, please. I wrote a book, this is a cover, A Danish Boy in Theresienstadt. The first edition came out in 2012. I updated it and added some chapters, and it was published in 2017. Theresienstadt was the camp I was in. That's the German version. Terezin would be the Czech version. The camp was located, at that time, it was Czechoslovakia. Today it is the Czech Republic. On the next slide, I'm showing a map of Denmark. I was born and raised in the middle of the country. The red mark and the red frame around it, Odense, many, many years ago. And I want to go back a long, long time. More specific, April the 9th, 1940. That was a fatal date in Denmark's history. Hitler and the Nazis invaded Denmark by land, by sea, and by air. There wasn't much of a battle going on for one simple reason. Denmark had signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler and the Nazis, along with 20 other countries in Europe. Hitler invaded every one of the 20 countries. We learned early on that we couldn't trust the man. He was an evil man. So, as I remember it, and I was 5 years old, the battle was very, very short. There was no way little Denmark could compete with the war machine from Germany. We were not prepared. And as a result, for the next 5 years, Denmark was occupied by the Nazis. Conditions were quite different in Denmark compared to the 20 other countries. In Denmark, the government continued to govern. The king continued to rule. To my knowledge, this didn't happen in any other country. So why was it different in Denmark? For a couple of reasons. Denmark's government continued to work with the German government to the greatest extent necessary. There were some exceptions. As an example, the government could not hire any Jewish people. But one of the major reasons for conditions being relatively normal in Denmark during that time period, first 3 years of the occupation, I believe was due to the Danish food, agricultural products. We used to ship them to Great Britain, our greatest ally. Now we were forced to ship the products down to Germany You can see on the map at the bottom how Germany and the borderline between Germany and Denmark. Products like salami, egg, butter, ham, and so on. On the next picture, I'm showing you King Christian X, the King of Denmark at that time. He was in his early 70s. He would ride on his horse every single morning. He wanted to show his support for the Danish people. He hated the Nazis. As an example, in this particular picture, 2 Nazi soldiers saluting the king, but the king doesn't want to have anything to do with them, and he is looking straight forward. So in summary, to my knowledge, there was no other country in Europe where both the king and the government, the local government, continued to govern. On the next slide, I'm showing a young fellow, and I don't know how well you can see me on the computer, on the screen, but if you recognize, or if any of you recognize this young fellow, maybe I haven't changed as much as I thought I had. But there's a much more important reason for sharing the picture with you. I continue to be amazed that my parents and I were able to go on vacation during a time when the Nazi soldiers were marching up and down the streets. They were literally on every street corner. I came up close to them many times. I would bicycle to and from school. I tried not to get too close to them. I was frightened by them with their guns and what I refer to as their ugly green uniform. But they never touched me. They never harmed me. They never spoke to me. I didn't speak German, and they didn't speak Danish. Unfortunately, conditions changed dramatically late summer, early fall of 1943. Sarah, can we go back to the map? That would be helpful. Thank you. You can see a number of towns in black scattered around Denmark. They were all, I would call them medium-sized towns, some of them very small. In every one of them, it seemed to be young people, college, university students. They didn't like the fact that Denmark had surrendered so easily, and they wanted to take up the fight. They got help from Sweden. You can see Sweden to the east of Denmark in the creamy color. Sweden remained neutral throughout the Holocaust, and they helped the Danish young people by sending weapons to them. And then the young people also got weapons from Great Britain. They would fly over Denmark at night, and then they would parachute the weapons down. It was an amazing undertaking, and I have just read a book about, they were actually high school students. They were part of one of the more famous groups, saboteur groups in my hometown, Odense. Unfortunately, they were arrested and they were in jail for a long, long time. The major mission of the students were very basic. Try and prevent products to reach Germany, especially food, but also all other products that the Germans forced us to make in different factories. They were so successful in achieving their goals that the German commandant went to the Danish prime minister, gave him an ultimatum: you have to arrest the young students, you have to sentence them to death. There was no way The Danish government agreed to do that. They resigned, and administration took over. And that became what we refer to as the final solution, the roundup of the Jewish people in Denmark. Once again, there was an exception in Denmark. A diplomat, a German diplomat, heard about the arrest date. We're talking about late September, early October, leaked the word to the Jewish congregation in Copenhagen. You can see Copenhagen in the northeastern part of Denmark, capital and by far the biggest city. In Copenhagen, I would say well over 90% of the Danish Jewish population lived in that area. That included my entire family, except our little family in Odense. What happened next was something almost unheard of. Many, many Christian families stood up for what they thought were right. They were very courageous. I like to refer to them as upstanders as opposed to bystanders. There were too many bystanders, not only standing by, but many of them not doing anything. And there were even some in every country, very few of them in Denmark, Nazis, that helped arrest the Jews. As a matter of fact, it's my understanding that they got financial rewards for each Jewish person they helped arrest. So as a result, and the help of all the upstanders in Denmark, 95% of the total Danish Jewish population managed to escape to Sweden. They were very good about opening up their borders, not only for Danish Jews, but also for Norwegian Jews. Unfortunately, my family, and to my knowledge, we had not been alerted as they were alerted in and around Copenhagen. And we were arrested one early morning. It was Rosh Hashanah, Jewish New Year. The Nazis figured this was an important holiday for the Jewish family, and as a result, they chose that day to arrest them. Fortunately, 95% were either in Sweden or on their way to Sweden in fishing boats from the area around Copenhagen across the strait, as you can see. Unfortunately, my family, we were among the 5% that were arrested. I was 8 years old when we were arrested, and I will never forget the day. It was a total surprise, certainly to me, but to my parents as well. We got about 40 or 50 minutes to get ready, packed our suitcase. My mother and I were allowed to go down and visit the baker. We lived on the 3rd floor in an apartment, and the baker was on the ground floor, and it was early in the morning. And the baker, we knew the baker. I played with his children, and he gave us a big sack of bakery products. Later on, I also found out that he offered my mother that he could possibly help us escape through the corridor in the basement. But my mother couldn't accept his offer. My father would have been shot on the spot. On the slide, a couple of slides forward, please. Perfect. You see the truck in the picture? That same truck. As a matter of fact, I believe this is the only artifacts that exist of the arrest of the Jewish people. And that truck took us from our home into a school in the middle of the town, and we are standing there in the schoolyard. We were there for a couple of hours. Later on, we were transported in the same truck to the western part of Denmark. And on the next slide, you'll see a picture of a cattle car. It's my understanding that the cattle car, a very similar cattle car, is actually stationed at the college at the present time. I hope many of you have had an opportunity or will have an opportunity to see it. I think you get quite a different picture if you have a chance to get into the cattle car in the school. Our cattle car was very similar to the one I'm pictured. It was pitch black, no windows, no lights. There was one door, it was locked from the outside. I'm often asked, did anybody escape? It was impossible. We just couldn't escape. On the other hand, it's my understanding that in another cattle car from Denmark, an elderly Danish lady committed suicide rather than ending up in a concentration camp. Not only was it pitch black, but they didn't give us anything to eat. We didn't get anything to drink. Fortunately, we were able to share the bakery products. Other inmates brought sandwiches, snacks, and we would all share whatever we had. I can still see the frightened faces of the adults in the cattle car. Can you imagine what this 8-year-old boy was like? I had no idea exactly what, 8 years old, I didn't understand what was happening. Yes, I knew about the occupation in Denmark, but I couldn't imagine why we were arrested and why me and why not some other people, friends or family. The smell was getting worse and worse. There were no bathroom facilities. We had to use buckets in the corner. Made one stop, got some fresh air, and then we got some water to drink. Then eventually, after more than 84 hours, or more than 3 days and 3 nights, we arrived, as you can see on the next slide, in Tersen. Tersen, located about 550 miles south of Denmark, about 40 miles north of Prague, the biggest city and the capital of the Czech Republic. On the next slide, I'm showing a train station on the left and some, I believe they're Dutch inmates arriving. At that time, we did not have a train station in Tersen. We had to walk for about 1.5 miles into camp. As soon as we arrived in the camp, the screaming Nazis ordered us, empty your pocket. They took our valuables, jewelry, cash. Later on, my father told me that when we were arrested, the Germans had encouraged him to bring money. I'm sure that happened at just about every single arrest. In camp, as you can see on the next picture, I'm showing an illustration of a loft. This is typical where the inmates spend, in our case, about 18 long months. We were split up into groups, men, women, children, and seniors. My father, as an example, would be staying in a loft, very similar to this illustration. You see the bunk beds. It was very, very difficult to sleep, especially in the beginning. Yes, we did have a mattress, but there was very little straw in the mattress. So basically, we were lying directly on wood. It was cold in the winter. It was hot in the summer. I remember waking up in the summer, scratching my hands. I'd never heard about fleas, lice, or bed bugs. My mother tried to explain it to her 8-year-old boy. Everybody 16 years or older had to work slave labor. Oh, I should mention, because this was most unusual, that somehow they allowed me to stay with my mother for the entire 18 months. I think that helped me a great deal, kind of having not only my mother, but she was also my mentor during those 18 months. So my father was assigned no choice. Whatever they ordered him to work at, he had to do it. He was an attorney, used to office work, litigation in the courthouse. And suddenly he was ordered to work outside. Beginning of the winter, was getting cold. And here's a picture of the people working in the road. And it was very hard for him. He was not used to manual labor. I really feel it was most unfortunate that he wasn't assigned an inside job. But anyway, he couldn't handle it. My mother told me he lost 50% of his body weight and we got very little food to eat, so it didn't have much energy. He eventually was transferred to an infirmary, and at the infirmary, they had very good, competent doctors and nurses, but they couldn't save my father. He passed away at a young age of 40. He had been married to my mother for less than 10 years. He clearly died from hunger, but there was no way the Germans were going to tell the world that anybody died from hunger, so they listed pneumonia as a reason for his death. To my knowledge, my mother was not physically abused like my father was. A young man in my father's group told us that he was whipped and he was kicked when he didn't produce the arbitrary goals set by the Germans. I'd heard about people being physically abused, but when it happens to one's own father, it's a different story. To my knowledge, my mother was not physically abused, but she was certainly, and I refer to it as mentally abused, had many different jobs. One job was in a big factory. She was cleaning the floors. And it was a huge factory, my mother told me. So late in the day, and they all worked long hours, 10 hours and more. An officer came in, looked at the shiny floor, suddenly found a bucket of dirty water, literally kicked the bucket, and the water spread all over the floor. Yes, my mother had to redo the whole thing. When she got back to the barracks, not only was she very, very tired, but she was very upset. And it's hard to imagine how one human being can treat another human being that way. I was 8 years old. I didn't have to work. But my mother thought it was a good idea to do some voluntary work. Not much you can do at that age. I became a messenger, and I would take messages and documents from one office to the other. I tried not to stay too long in each office because, as I mentioned earlier, I was frightened at the look of the German soldiers. But again, nothing happened. So one day, and maybe we can go to the next slide, please. One day, I finished my work. It was late afternoon, and I went back on my way back to the barrack. And then I passed the kitchen, and I saw at the end of the kitchen some big sacks of raw potatoes. I looked around to make sure nobody was watching, and then I helped myself to some raw potatoes. Yes, I was stealing. I shouldn't have done it, but we needed all the help we could get as far as food was concerned. By the way, I was very lucky that I wasn't arrested. I hate to think what would have happened if I'd been arrested. As a matter of fact, some years ago, I was talking to a middle school, and they named me the Potato King. But anyway, talking about food, and it's not going to take long. At breakfast, we lined up for coffee, substitute coffee, mainly boiled water, excuse me, about half a loaf of bread for the family to last the entire week. And here's a slide, what I refer to as the soup kitchen, lining up for up to 40, 50 minutes at lunchtime. Yes, can you imagine eating potato soup, boiled water with potato peel and potato skin every single day? That's all we got at lunch. I can still remember standing in line with our bowls and wooden spoons, and we tried to get to the bottom of the kettle. At least we would get some nutrition in form of potato skin and potato peel. We would line up again for dinner. At least at dinner we would get different kinds of soup. I specifically remember beef, barley, and about once a week or maybe 10 days, we got a typical German pasta dish, dumplings. How were we able to survive on those meager portions? It's my understanding that 35,000 out of 140,000 inmates in Terrasen lost their lives primarily due to hunger. I believe the only reason I'm here today to share my experience in camp is the fact that all nations, including the Danes, started to get packages from home, food, vitamins, and clothing. Especially the food helped a great deal. But just the fact that we got food in addition to what they fed us doesn't mean that we didn't go to bed hungry at night. I remember going to bed, I was hungry most nights. But I think without the packages, I don't know that my mother and I would have survived. So one day my mother is opening a package. It's very heavy. My mother doesn't understand that it is so heavy. She opens the package, no food, no clothing, no vitamins. She came across 2 bricks at the bottom of the package. That's why it was so heavy. I want to give you another example. I was by this time 9 years old. I'd outgrown my shoes. How was my mother going to get shoes for her 9-year-old boy? Couldn't buy them, but she bartered with a Czech lady. The Czech lady got some Danish food, and my mother got some shoes, used shoes, that I was able to wear the rest of the time. I'm often asked, what did I do in my spare time, so to speak, when I wasn't working twice a day or lining up for food 3 times a day? I played with other children. I especially have fond memories of playing with some Czech children about the same age. We were able to communicate. I learned the language phonetically. And we literally tried to play soccer. We didn't have a real soccer field, it was a gravel field. The mothers took some old clothes, tied them together, and we were able to kick the soccer ball around. I still, believe it or not, have fond memories of my time with those children. I actually, for a few minutes, had a life the way a 9-year-old boy should, playing with children, other children. But then suddenly I looked up and I saw the brick wall around the camp, and I came back to reality. And so one day I come back to play soccer with my Czech friends. They didn't show up. I was very disappointed. Later on, I found out, on the next slide, you'll see cattle cars, 85,000 inmates from Tiersen were transported in cattle cars similar to this one, all the way east, mostly to extermination camps like Auschwitz and Birkenau. Here you see an officer watching the proceedings at the train station. On the next slide, I went back to Tiersen in 2009. I wanted to see where I spent 18 long, bad months. I wanted to do some research on my book. My wife was concerned about what would happen to me. Would I get nightmares? Fortunately, this didn't happen. My mother was often asked, did she go back to Tiersen? She said, no, once was more than enough. And I respect that, but I'm glad I went back. In the picture, there was a memorial, and this was in the exact same place where a number of children around my age formed a chain from a crematorium where all the bodies had been cremated, and we took a cardboard awning from one person to the other, and finally it was thrown in the river. Behind the trees, you can barely see it. 25 urns ended up in the river. Tiersen has often been referred to as a model camp. This was very misleading. And the next slide, I'm showing what the camp looked like when a delegation from Red Cross in Denmark, Switzerland, and Germany arrived in the camp. Denmark wanted to see how the Danish Jews were being treated. And in the beginning, the Nazis didn't think that was a good idea. But the more they thought about it, the better they liked the idea because they could use it as propaganda. And the camp the delegation saw when they visited in June of 1944 was not the same as it was every single day. Suddenly the buildings were painted. There were products in the stores. There was a musical, there was a pavilion, there were benches, there were lawns. All the Danes were transferred temporarily to better quarters. The delegation arrived and never saw what Tiersen was like. And they went back to their respective countries and reported what they saw. Big, big hoax. But it's misleading to call Denmark, call Tiersen a model camp. It was a model camp only for one day. And that's when the delegation, the Red Cross delegation visited. On the next slide, I refer to it as happiness returns. White buses from Sweden liberated 17,000 Jewish people in different camps. including about 450 from Denmark. It was a miracle that they were able to drive back and forth without losing anybody. They avoided bombardment. It was a convoy of about 20 buses. And on the next slide, we've just arrived in Denmark, past the border. And what a welcome we got. I'm always surprised when I look at that picture, because Denmark was still occupied and all these people were still able to welcome us back. We ended up in Sweden in quarantine, and we spent about 10 days there. Then we met with my family. As I mentioned, they were all from Copenhagen, and they had been liberated. It was wonderful to see them again. Then we were in temporary quarters for a few weeks. And on May the 5th, 1945, on the next picture, I'm showing the Danish flag. It was flying all over Denmark on that particular day to celebrate the surrender. The Germans finally surrendered after 5 long years. Denmark celebrated as never before. We tried to celebrate in Sweden, but truly I didn't feel like a free person until some weeks later we returned to Denmark, to my hometown. Our apartment had been rented out. We had nowhere to stay. Some family, not some, but a nice family took us in. And I cannot say enough about the welcome we got from my parents' friends, from my friends, from the school I went to, from the teachers, and so on. Can you imagine a family taking us in? I think we stayed there for 2 or 3 weeks. They helped us out. A teacher gave me private lessons. I was not allowed to officially have any schooling in any camp. Did have some private lessons, so in hiding, so to speak. I was able to return to my old classmates, went back into 5th grade, graduated from high school some years later, and then from commercial college in Denmark and Copenhagen. And I wanted to see part of the country when you live in such a small country. I joined a Danish food company. After special training in Denmark, I spent time in England, Canada, and finally United States. I continued to work for the Danish company for a while. Later on, I joined some American food companies, and I wanted the challenge. Having always worked for a Danish company, I wanted the challenge of working for an American company. I've been in the United States since 1962. I retired in 1999. This summer, or this June, it'll be 27 years since I retired. How time flies when you get old. And then I compared the 27 years to the 18 months, not 18 years in camp. What a contrast. After retirement, this is quite, I should say, when we returned to Denmark, we spoke very little about our stay in Tærsen. And this is very common, not only for prisoners or inmates, but also for liberators. So in my retirement, I started doing my book, but I don't think I started it until 2007. And I want to mention, because based on my personal experience, I think there's greater interest, and there should be, in the Holocaust today than never before. But we didn't really hear much about the Holocaust for many, many years until 1961, when we had the famous Eichmann trial in Israel. But until then, there's very little talk about the Holocaust. And that was the same in my home. When I got married later on, we talked a little more about it, and even more with my 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren. They've all read my book, and they have heard me speak a number of times. It's been my passion to share my Holocaust experiences, and it started when it started after my book had been published. I was ready for it, and I'm so glad that I finally opened up. I'm so glad I started speaking. I cannot imagine going to my grave without sharing my experiences. My first talk was to an 8th grade class. It was my grandson. It's hard to imagine. He's 28 years now. And it went quite well. And it was completely different. I was reading passages. It was quite different than today. And I'll never forget sitting in their library and student after student entered. I had no idea how many people there would be, but I think we had a couple of hundred. So since that time, and I'm very lucky that I kept record, I've spoken to over 900 groups. I'm approaching 140,000 people. And I hope we have good genes in the family. I like to continue as long as I'm able to do it. And this is my busy schedule, busy season with all the schools, except this week when we are having spring break up here. I could go on and on, but I want to finish by showing you on the next slide and the last slide my website. If any of you interested in more background information, it's available on the website. I think this is probably a good time to finish and open it up for questions, Sarah.
Yes, sir. So, first of all, thank you very much for speaking for us, Steen. And if any of you have questions, if you wouldn't mind coming up here to the podium, because we've got a dual mic situation. So this is for us to hear, and this is for him to hear. So if you have any questions, come on up to the podium. And while you do, I'll just ask you, Steen. So Denmark flies the flag on May the 5th, and that's the national holiday. Why else do they fly the flag? What would you tell people when you were a little boy? Why were they flying that flag?
Oh, you remember. It was my birthday on May the 5th. So when the Germans surrendered May the 5th, 1945, I was 10 years old. And in subsequent years, the flag would be flying every single May the 5th. And I would tell all the people that would be listening, yes, you know why they're flying the flag today. They're celebrating my birthday.
Do you guys have any questions for Steen? Come on up.
Hi, Steen. I'm Michelle. Nice to meet you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
It's right here. Okay. So my question is, when you were writing your book, was it difficult for you to recall certain events or details, or did it feel more cathartic and you felt more like it was lifting a weight out of your body? Like, oh, I can finally speak about this, or were you more frightened at the beginning when you were writing it?
That's a good question to start us off with. Yes, it was difficult. The book and my talk today is based on a number of things. A, what I remember. B, what my mother told me. I was also very lucky that she filled in a questionnaire 8 full type pages. There was a survey, and there's a wealth of information in it. And I included a copy of the survey in my book. So also I did research. So it all came together. And as I said earlier, it helped a great deal going to TAS. And I don't regret going back there. As a matter of fact, if I was able to do it today, from a physical point of view, I would go back. Thank you for getting us started. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you. Thank you for telling your story. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, come on up, Henry. And we do have his website that was on the final slide. We can share that with you folks. If you do think of questions later on you'd like to ask him, or if you'd like to purchase his book.
So my question relates to the one slide that you covered where you mentioned how everybody lined up for the potato soup, and you mentioned that I believe it was your mother at the time was delivered a package, and instead of it being like having like any like food or like vitamins, it was just like entirely, not entirely, but it had like bricks at the bottom. Why was she delivered that package? Like, what was that for?
Oh, it looked like a package with food, like a normal package we got. As I mentioned, all nations started getting packages from home, and we got packages from Sweden, and we got packages from Denmark. And that package, the way it was shaped, it looked like a real package. And maybe it was on purpose that the guards delivered it to us, because maybe they wanted to show who's boss.
I see. All right.
Did
Thank
that
you.
answer your question?
Yes, that did. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just cruelty, just to prove that they could do something and torment you mentally. Anybody else have a question? Come on up.
Hello, my name is Valeria, and I have a question about, so you said that you ate a lot of potato soup. Have you been able to eat it again, or has it like just affected you that you can't eat it again?
That's an interesting question. I do eat potatoes, like baked potatoes and French fries, but I have to tell you, I don't eat potato soup. Although
No.
the potato soup we get here in this country is quite different to the one we got in camp.
Okay, thank you for answering.
Thank you.
This is a very good question. Anybody else? Now they're getting warmed up. Here comes Matthew. This is the main one for him.
Hi, my name is Matthew, and I'm curious about when you came back to Denmark, if specifically among kids your own age asked you a lot of questions about like why you were gone or what happened.
It's another interesting question. I was surprised that not more of my friends asked questions. I had very few questions, and I had an opportunity in later life to talk to them about it when I went back to Denmark for an anniversary. And they said, no, we didn't think it would be appropriate to ask questions. If you wanted to talk about it, I'm sure you would do it. I'm not saying there weren't any, but there were very, very few. As a matter of fact, for a number of years, I thought that between my mother and the principal of the school, they had asked my friends not to ask questions, but that was not the case. And at that time, you were 10 or 11 years old. It's quite mature. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for telling your story.
That's a good question as well. Anybody else? All right, William's coming up. But while he's coming up, I'm gonna ask you a question, Steen. Speaking of the wisdom of children, which we've talked about a lot, you and I, can you tell them what the boy before you was doing with the cardboard urns, the cardboard boxes, before he passed it to you in that human chain when you guys were having to throw the human remains into the river? What was the boy ahead of you doing?
Thank you for reminding me. I forgot about it. I don't know how I could forget about it. A friend of mine who was a couple of years older was next to me in the line. And I found out much later on that every time he got an urn, he would turn it around to make sure, and he was next to me to make sure that I wouldn't see the name or the number of my father. I didn't find out about before getting back to Denmark, reading it in the newspaper. And again, very mature for a 12-year-old boy. And I'll never forget reading about it.
Absolutely. All right, William.
Hi.
This is the one.
Yep. Hi, I'm William Erickson. I was just wondering when the buses from Sweden came, like why weren't they stopped and like why were they allowed back?
I didn't get the last part.
No. When the buses from Sweden came, like why weren't they stopped by the Germans and why were you like allowed back on them?
Why were they stopped by the Germans?
Why were they
The
not
buses.
stopped?
Yeah, why were they not stopped by the
Why were
Germans?
they not stopped? I'm sorry. Another good question. They were not stopped because they had the permission from high up to save the Danish Jews or to liberate the Danish Jews. It was a deal made between Himmler, one of the close allied of Hitler, and a person by the name of Folke Bernadotte from Sweden. They made the deal, and Himmler, and I'm often asked, why did Himmler make the deal? Quite frankly, at that time, he knew that they lost the war, and he wanted to make sure, or thought he could be treated differently if I let all the Danes be liberated. Obviously, that wasn't it. As a matter of fact, I think he was one of those that committed suicide.
Very good question.
Thank you.
There's some good questions today, so.
Yep, they've got their thinking caps on for sure. Anybody else? Come on up. We've got two. Let's see who gets here first. Pedro, slow down.
Hi, my name's Jessica. You said that your mom was very supportive. I was wondering what you remember, like her saying or her doing, that helped, I guess, be emotional supportive for you.
That's a great question. Offhand, I have to tell you, I cannot remember anything specific, but when you're 8 or 9 years old and you are in prison and you're an inmate, it's very, very encouraging, especially after you lost your father, to have your mother around you. I could go to her. Normally, children would stay in dormitories, but I was close to my mother, although we didn't have that much time together because she worked for about 10 hours every single day. So that's the best way I can answer your question.
Very good. Thank you. All right, next we've got Pedro.
Hello, I'm Pedro. My question is, do you forgive Hitler and do you think he was misguided?
Do I forgive Hitler?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you feel about, the ideology, how misguided he was?
Oh gosh, I don't know how much time we have, but I'm glad that question came up. Absolutely, I would never forgive Hitler and the Nazis. I know it's a good thing to forgive, but he was responsible for the life of not only 6 million Jews, including my father and millions of others. As you probably know, he was a coward he committed suicide on April the 30th, 1945, and how he could promote his propaganda without anybody trying to step in, anybody trying to kill him. It's amazing that he had the power that he did in Germany.
Yeah, and that nobody.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
It's a good question, really. I mean, I know that it might seem kind of wild to think about, could you forgive Hitler? But I've heard Holocaust survivors say before that they could, and I'm in the same boat as you, Steen. I don't know how. Maybe those are people with a better heart than mine. Just I wouldn't be able to forgive. I guess that's why I do what I do. I don't forgive on your behalf.
As a matter of fact, just a few years ago, and I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, there was a Holocaust survivor embracing a Nazi soldier, and it said, "I forgive." So, like you, I can never understand it.
It's definitely tough. That's what interests me about the Holocaust is it's intensely psychological as much as it is historical. And it shows the worst of people, but in some cases it shows the best of people when you see the stories of resistance and those who fought back and those who hid children and hid people. So any last minute questions, folks? Come on up. Excuse me.
Okay. Hello, Steen. I'm Nathan. I have a quick question. Did the SS ever give you like a tattoo? Because I hear that they gave out the numbers, they write them on the arms to these Holocaust survivors or people in the camps. So I was wondering, did they do that to you?
I do not have a tattooed number on my underarm. It is not correct when in all videos, all films, books, and so on, you see survivors with a number on their underarm. It was only and only in quote the people that were transported to extermination camp Auschwitz-Birkenau that had tattooed. We all had numbers, and we all had to wear the Star of David, but it was only the people from Auschwitz and Birkenau that had a number tattooed. And I can never understand why that is publicized as much as it is. And I'm glad you brought it up.
Good question. Anyone else? All right. Well, you've been a captive audience. Thank you so much. If you think of any questions for Steen, Steve, can we put up real quick that website real quick? If you guys want to take out your phone and take a picture.
That's great. That's a good
Yeah.
idea.
Let me get it up. One moment.
Sorry, I'm sorry. You could have closed. But you guys can take your phone and take a picture of the website, and then you can directly contact him if you would like. I know we're so used to saying no phones, no phones. Here's a professor saying, take out your phone. Wow. So it's just steenmetznneverforget.com. Got one more? Yeah. We've got one more question for you, Steen. I think you'll like this one.
Great.
Who are you rooting for in the World Cup?
I'm sorry?
Who are you rooting for in the World Cup?
Mr. Soccer player.
That's the first question like that I had. Oh, it's my understanding that Denmark is going to be part of the World Cup. So I don't think they have a big chance of winning, but they will be my favorite team. The next one would be United States.
Good question.
No, thank you.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then I will bid you all adieu. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you, Steen, for sharing your story. Can we get a round of applause for Steen, please? Check out our program of events. We have a few more things going for the rest of the day. Michelle? Oh, Steve, can we put Steen back on the main screen here for a moment?
Yes.
Okay. Steen, some folks want you to smile nice and pretty for the camera. They want to take a picture of you. All right.
While you're doing that, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you for the audience coming.
It's a pleasure and an honor.
Especially the questions. I thought there were some excellent questions.
They get very good. You had about 50 today, by the way. All right. Thank you guys so much. Check out the rest of our program of events. And Steen, we will see you Friday for the students.